Okay, this video is about the homemade poor man's flat bending jig for bending an AK flat, which I have right here. I got lucky at Home Depot and got some steel that ended up being just as thick. I mean, when I say just as thick, I mean just as thick. And by thick, I mean your width from here to here. And it is just as thick as my trunnions. That's another thing. I would go ahead and get your parts kit in before you try to bend your flat, because from what I understand, the trunnions vary. And what I'm going to do, I've kind of modified the ones that I found online and on YouTube. Everybody seems to just use flat bar steel, like what these are. These are two sandwiching the flat, by the way. Everybody just seems to put two together like that, space out like that, and they seem to have a lot of bending problems. So what I went with was some angle iron here. I didn't do just the two bolts on each side. I went ahead and did bolts on the bottom here. The flat's going to be pressed in from the top. I went ahead and did the bolts on the bottom so that I don't have to put any clamps on this. It's going to stop the middle here from bowing in and out, hopefully, if all goes well. I plan on greasing this area up really well as inside here. And it's going to set on there like so. I have not adjusted my width in here yet. I literally just got done making this thing. A little bit of drill press action. This thing was made out of two pieces of steel. You know, you got your 4 foot long piece of 2" by 3/16 angle iron, and then this was just I believe the same thickness. I actually have it right here somewhere. Anyways, you get the picture. I actually walked into Home Depot and found that there's some Samson Strong ties that are the same width as my trunnion as well, but I did not like. They're obviously not that thick, and I worried about them bending and giving a little bit whenever I put it in the press. By the way, I made a press. You're gonna need a press for this. I see guys that are doing this with hammers and stuff, and I'm not gonna go through that crap. I'm gonna put it in the press and get it done. If I can't do it with the press, then I don't know. Then we'll try the whole hammer thing. I think they hammer it, I think, just to get it started. But you know, that's 12 tons. It should be more than enough. Sorry about the mess, by the way. I've been drilling and working on some stuff. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to get I have a pre-bent blank that I'm going to set in here, and I'm going to set my width to that, because my trunnion fits in that blank very well as well. So that's how I'm going to get this width. And like I said, this width is determined by your trunnions. So this is my first AK build. I'm going to try to keep you updated from the get-go. So yeah, we'll get started. Alright, step number 2. We're about to try to bend this flat. Got all my spacing set. I didn't end up spacing it with that other receiver blank that I have. I just went off the thickness of this times 2, because you have two sides. And I didn't want to use that other receiver blank, because I'm sure, like the trunnions, those probably vary in thickness. So rather go with as thick as, you know, get it right the first time. So what I'm going to do is I got some grease on a glove. I'm just lubing up the area. Alright, you can see it's just barely wider. Make sure when you're bending that you don't put your jig over top of your bolts here. The bolts on the bottom, it shouldn't matter. It's going to be nice and bent before it hits those way down there. Okay, gonna start bending. Alright, I'm all set up here. I think, I hope. I ended up having to put another nut. That nut under there doesn't actually have a... Okay, I'm going to interrupt myself here. What I should have done that I noticed later on down the road, that you'll see in the video, is that this bar, this piece that I have on top of the flat, I probably should have welded it directly to the two pieces of steel that are sandwiched in the flat, just because it started to kind of get a little lopsided on those bolts, but it ended up working out in the end. Just throwing that in there so you're not watching this and trying it at the same time. And next time I probably will end up raising up the press, the flat, to a little bit closer to the jack, so I can get a little more of a straight bend. But everything ended up working out. Okay, looks like that side's starting to lift up. We're starting to get a little bend. I'm going to stand up and get my head out of there. So. Everything about this is slow. Last thing I want to happen is something to break and come flying at me. You can see it's starting to bend. It's going to get easier once it gets in there. Awful lot of cracking going on. Once I get it in there, I'm going to have to, okay. I don't know if it's just me. It looks like we have a little more of a bend going on in the back than we do in the front.
And this is exactly what I was talking about just a second ago. This is what I would weld something just to keep it a little, make it even.
Adjust.
As well as side to side, not just front and back. I ended up having to adjust a couple of times.
Bending a little on the front. Okay, we've readjusted, and ideally hunker down on this piece of steel and see what we get. Okay, there it goes. Starting to bend a little. Okay. Getting a bend. More of a bend over here, it looks like. It looks pretty straight down the center of it. Wondering if I should have loosened, made this a little wider. I'm going to give it one more crank and see what we have. Okay. That side kind of popped up nice. Okay, that's my jig down there. Is moving. I don't want it to be any more bent than that. I want this side to start bending, so we're gonna readjust.
Okay, from this point on, it's just going to be me talking over my video. I ended up running out of memory before I got some valid points across. Long story short, the flat ended up bending. Bent great. I did end up using the hammer a couple times in between to kind of try to get that other side to get down in there. Again, if I had welded that long piece that's sticking up, going to the jack, straight to the metal pieces that are sandwiched in the flat, it probably would have ended up working out a little better for me, but it did. It ended up working out great. The 2 bolts on the very bottom that I added, in addition to whatever everybody else was doing for their poor man's rig, helped out a lot. Whenever the rig, the sandwiching rig, hit the bottomed out on those, it actually flattened it out. So it worked out great. Okay, this is our flat that we just bent. Ended up coming out pretty well. And this is it with the trunnions in it. I mean, they fit snug. They're nice, very nice. Try to get it on the camera. I've already gone ahead and I've spot welded my my rails in there. Try to, yeah, spot welded them in there. I ended up making some kind of Harbor Freight rig, and I'll show that to you here in a second, but just wanted to show you how the flat looked, and how it ended up working out. Okay, whenever you get your Harbor Freight spot welder, the tongs that come with it cannot get in there to spot weld your bolt rails in, so keep that in mind. I didn't want to end up modifying the bottom one that came with it, because I might end up taking this thing back and get some money back, and we'll call it a rental. But what I did end up getting was a piece of copper tubing, like for your plumbing section, that ended up being the same diameter as the tong. I ended up flattening it out. That's a MIG welding tip right there. Drilled a hole through it, popped the MIG welding tip in there, bent this up to where it could clamp on, and I was able to get this end inside of the rails, and this end here was outside of the receiver. You know, to spot weld, you're gonna just clamp it down, medium, not a lot of pressure. I ended up bending this up a little bit just so it could, you know, you weren't pressing down on it too hard. But then you hold your switch, 5 seconds on, turn it off, 5 seconds off, then take it off. One continuous motion. It ended up turning out great. Those welds are nice and solid, and they should work out great for me.